I brought this up to Kevin McCarthy at one point prior to him rolling out the plan that he had before the last election. I said, where's the visual again? Where's the, we get it, we're driving, government cars need to get reined in, or something that shows, and I just don't feel like the party, and you're the business guy.
So the beginning of the solution, I actually wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal the day after I got elected, saying what we need to do is, use the debt ceiling, and use the debt ceiling to provide us some leverage for future spending fights, okay? And one of them would be End Government Shutdown Act. We always get slaughtered in that, so let's not threaten government shutdowns, let's end them. Okay, if you can't get your act together, you don't have appropriation bills, you don't shut the government down, you just spend at last year's levels. That gives us leverage. The No Default Act, which prioritizes spending. So there's no talk, by the way, we'll never default on our debt.
Right.
We have more than enough revenue to service our debt, so we'll never default on it. It's just a quasi-default where we're not paying off all our suppliers. Well, listen, if you're a supplier of the federal government, you're supplying a bankrupt entity, you ought to be cautious. I mean, in the private sector, those suppliers, if they're dealing with a bankrupt entity, they get a haircut, right? So you have to give that you have to obtain leverage, recognizing that Republicans will never win a shutdown battle, will never win a debt ceiling battle. So create leverage around those points. And that's what, again, what's so disappointing to me is the House Freedom Caucus gave McCarthy leverage. It was we're the only ones that have a solution. We passed an increased debt ceiling, $1.5 trillion. What's your proposal, Democrats?
Right.
But instead of using that leverage effectively, and what I would argue is, no matter what he did under that, he never should have gone off the $1.5 trillion, because the debt ceiling gives us leverage. We get a little bit this time, we get a little bit next time.
Right.
First of all, we've never yet had a legitimate vote on Preventing Government Shutdown Act. That's a bill I passed through my committee twice. It was a bipartisan bill between Maggie Hassan and James Langford. It just does what I just suggested. Just don't shut the government down, spend at last year's levels. Who would vote against that? Now, if they did,
but here,
but why don't we ever give it a decent vote? Why don't we use that as leverage?
Exactly. So that's my answer. Why?
Because the uniparty likes to spend money. That's the bottom line. I mean, it's a sad fact. It is the uniparty. Sean, I still view myself more Tea Party than Republican.
Right.
I sprang out of the Tea Party.
There's two pieces that I want to pull on this, because one goes back to the comment that you made a little while ago on COVID. You said big pharma. How much outside industry influence guides these decisions, right? In other words, you hear these stories where it's somebody comes in and says, "Hey, that's great, Senator, but hey, we got a bunch of people in your district and we've been donating, and plus, da da da." I mean, how much is that the uniparty, and how much of it is the pressure?
I think the military-industrial complex, the capture, it's a big, the pharmaceutical industrial complex. I mean, all these agencies are captured by the businesses that they regulate, right? But the capture is done more behind the scenes with the bureaucrats. It's, let's face it, government employees get to retire at a pretty early age.
Yeah.
They don't quit working. They go to work for the industries they're regulating. So especially the ones higher at the top, I mean, they're the ones that's making decisions on regulations, that type of thing. You think they're going to, cut themselves off of a big paying job? So I think that's where most of the corruption occurs, is the people inside the agencies that have an idea,
that came from
that have a job offer,
right?
Whether it's the generals going into Lockheed and and those military contractors, or whether it's Gottlieb going to work for Pfizer, just name them. All these guys.
So what's but that's my question. You have this unique accounting / business background. As somebody who's now been in the system and has fought, what's the answer?
First, expose it. I don't think it's generally known yet. I don't think it's adequately exposed. And again, going up against COVID cartel, it's really difficult to expose it. But I'm going to keep trying, okay? So you expose what that process is, and then hopefully you can get legislation, but you also have to starve the beast. The overall solution is limit its growth, start shrinking it, start moving the governing authority back to the states.
Do you think there's any hope, like I was saying before, I think, to use your formula, exposing it, starving it, why can't a group of Republicans think of 5 things that are no-brainers? And again, it's how big is the government? $6 trillion?
We try.
But give me 5 things and say pot plant growing, electric vehicles that are on Mars. I mean, find 5 programs and force everyone to vote and say, you tell me that you're going to tell your constituents this is 1.6 million. Maybe it's something really small, but start the exercise. Because the thing that I find funny, you talk about like a number, right? I always hear, like, without ever knowing, you know how much we need for COVID? $12.6 trillion. How did you come up with that?
Pull out of a hat.
Exactly. I mean, the accountant in you has got to be going.
No, it drives me nuts. Yeah.
I mean, like, it's like, imagine you putting your mortgage, your mortgage payment together, and you go, you know how much we need for the mortgage? $1.6 million, and your spouse would look at you and be like, how is that possible? Well, I came up with a number. You'd be like, no, you can look at the bank statement and see how much to pay.
Sean, this job drives me nuts. I say nobody can out frustrate me. but it's not a boring job, okay?
No.
And I'm hoping
sounds like there's a lot to keep.
And there are things you can do, like Right to Try Me. They're accomplishments, okay? And it's so important. I mean, we have to preserve this nation. I mean,
yes.
we are the last best hope. We truly are. And right now, we're circling the drain. I mean, the Democrats have put us on a very dangerous path. I try and remind people that Venezuelans, they voted themselves into poverty. Just took a couple decades.
Right.
We've been voting ourselves into a really dangerous situation right now. We better reverse course pretty quick.
So I remember when I was at the RNC, you used to talk a lot about not just like messaging, how to do that. Do you think, because I think that's half the battle, the exposing it and selling it and telling people, here's why this makes sense, here's the problem, here's, sort of like in addiction, here's what you're doing to yourself.
I've heard a lot of times, that why doesn't the Republican Party have a spokesman?
Yes.
Because everybody wants to be the spokesman. Okay? And it's hard to herd cats.
I tried that, by the way.
And quite honestly, the media picks the spokesman for you. So I don't get a whole lot of exposure on mainstream media because I'm the counter narrative.
And I get that, but what I'm saying is, what can do? Is this I guess to dial back? Is it a messaging problem? Meaning, if we could get more cohesion, would that help solve it?
Cohesion, strategic planning is always helpful. Talking about amendment votes, when we have these vote-a-ramas and stuff, I mean, leadership does a pretty good job of, okay, let's vote on the border, let's vote on, we try and highlight that, but nobody pays attention to that. People have to realize that these are macro issues, and it requires a macro messaging campaign. You can't be
talking
not even
I don't
part of my problem with my investigations, I mean, you get down to so many details, you start going down to all these rabbit holes. In order to fully understand it, you need to know the details.
Right.
But then at the same time, you got to bring it up to the 30,000-foot level and be able to describe
and sell it.
The corruption and the criminal activity of the Bidens. It's not an easy thing.
So let me ask you, just kind of in closing, what keeps you up at night? What do you think we need? I'm personally just, like, I am freaked out about China. I don't think that we take China serious enough as a threat. I think post-COVID, instead of saying, wow, they sent us a disease, did nothing about it, covered up, lied about it, we went, you know what we should do? Let's buy more stuff from them. Let's lean heavily more on them. Let's get our and I keep going, to the nut of this conversation. I'm like, they're coming, and our answer is just like, hey, what's on TV?
So to me, you would ask me a couple years ago, what's the greatest threat? I would have said our debt and deficit, okay?
Yep.
And I don't deny the challenge that China is. Right now, I think the greatest threat to this nation is the division. And I try and point out to audiences, we're not a naturally divided country. We're not. Right. America is a great country because Americans are good people.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure you click the link below to find out more, or you can go to SeanSpicerShow.com to stay up to date on all my content.